Welcome to the Spin Cycle Book Club, everybody. This is a special episode. We're actually recording this, what is it, Thursday, November 13th, but I think it's going to go out sometime around Thanksgiving. For those that are not joining us live, because this is a somewhat unusual thing for us. We're sitting here with 25 of our closest friends. We've got Toby, Brad, Sarah, Jeff. I'm going to just read up the thing right now, and we're going to be book clubbing it with this book. Le Fric. Le Freak? Le Fric? I should ask
The Fric.
Le Fric.
The Fric,
Pretty sure it's that.
probably.
Which is a, not quite slang, but close to it. It means money in French. And this book is a deep, deep, deep dive and fascinating dive into the Amory family. And I think a lot of you will probably recognize that name because that name is part of the company that basically controls professional cycling, the Amory Sport Organization. And they have since, as we found out in the book, basically the end of World War II. They have really, they've been the family behind the Tour de France through thick and thin, highs and lows. And these days, with the way that the cycling landscape is today, they are unquestionably the most powerful entity in the sport. In fact, I was recently working on a top 20 power list with Chris Marshall-Bell, one of our contributors, and the top 3 are all the Amorys, with Madame Maria Deal at the very top of that list. And that wasn't just from Chris and I; that was from talking with other people on the list. That was talking with a bunch of team GMs and folks at the UCI and agents and things like that, and everybody pointed to the Amorys as the real power brokers in pro cycling. So with that, Johnny Long, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for getting me to read an entire book from start to finish.
It's a genuinely good book.
It's great. It's very good.
Yeah.
It's very readable. I think what actually helps it a lot, and I think I saw someone talking about this, is that it's not written by a cycling journalist. So they're able to, like Alex Duff is able to have the step back and, delve enough in to give, proper cycling fans enough. But then my favorite bit of the book was the history stuff, like the World War stuff and the facts that you wouldn't necessarily delve into because you would have a lot of assumed knowledge, right? And that way I learned a ton. It was great.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we want to start. Well, it's where the book starts, and so that's where we want to start today, which is in this sort of immediate post-World World War II period, sort of mid-1940s, and it was a real gap in my knowledge, I think, of Tour de France history. Right, as you say, like a lot of our Tour de France history as cycling journalists it's very focused on the riders, particularly back then. Right, like I wasn't thinking about pro cycling governance issues in the late 40s and 50s. I've really spent a whole lot of time thinking about that. So that's why it was the first third of this book was particularly fascinating to me, and not necessarily meeting characters that I didn't know of. Obviously we know of Henri Desgrange and Godet and Levitan, who we'll get into in a little bit here. But finding out much more about them and sort of the dynamics between them. And the Godet Levitan
back and forth,
whatever you want to call it, and how through all of that you've got this Amory family kind of sitting over top of this, just lately getting their fingers dirty less and less, but back then absolutely sort of pulling the reins of the sport in one way or the other. And we've got comments already coming in, so I think I can Here we go. Oh, look at that.
Look at that.
Look at that.
Blimey.
Toby here. I was fascinated by the way the tour became property. Really brings home the way that the roots of ownership are often political, which gets lost in time and becomes a natural fact. As the story progresses, one realizes how political the tour is and how the ASO is able to continue as it is. Maybe the French state becomes, in that sense, another power broker in cycling through the ASO and the tour. I think that's a great way to kind of kick off this discussion of the book, because what we're essentially talking about in 1945, 1946, 1947, is the French state deciding the winners and losers of the next French economy, right? Yeah, well, I've been talking a lot. Jonny, your thoughts on that period and what kind of maybe stood out to you?
So effectively, what happens is, as I presume, we don't need to retread too much of the book, right? Because I'm presuming everyone who's listened to this has read the book. If not, we'll give a little bit of an overview. So we exit World War II. The Allies obviously had been preparing for the end of the war and knew and hoped victory would be on the horizon. So start planning for what the post-war world is going to look like. So you have obviously the Allies and particularly the US funneling money in because they want the economy to get back to normal. They're also obviously worried about the threat of communism seeping over for where the US wants a capitalist system to continue to exist. So with that, you have the French state kickstarting businesses like the printing press, but with the major difference of that, if you were a collaborator, you're going to have your property, your businesses taken from you and given to people who helped the Allies win, which is an interesting thing. There's that the well-worn phrase of the victors write history or whatever. I've mangled the phrase, but basically I've never known this was how the Tour de France came into the possession eventually of the Omri family, and it definitely then leads on to what Toby was saying of how the French state sits at the top because it's not the original owner who can be there. And maybe this is more of an American or British perspective where it's like, well, this is the thing that I invented and owned, so this is mine. Whereas I guess if you've kind of been given the Tour de France by the French state in so many ways, you then do feel, along with the fact that the French government have to close roads for you, you probably do feel beholden to the state. And while you own it, it's the ownership with the caveat that really this doesn't just belong to me. And I think that's where also you have, you don't just think of selling it off to the highest bidder. There's something deeper going on where you feel a responsibility to, I don't know, your country, the fans, the French people, which is interesting and a common theme throughout the book. Yeah.
And to skip ahead a fair amount here, we have so many times over the last decade or two looked at various or entities have come in and said, hey, we buy the Tour de France all the way, the Chinese in 2014, 2015. There's been sort of rumors in the last couple of years of the Saudis being interested in similar things. And to return to, I think it was Toby was the one that we put that comment up, and how the French state is actually a power broker in cycling. I've sort of known that, right? David Lepartien is a French mayor and a French politician and also the UCI president. So all these things start to sort of loop together. But at the same time, I didn't fully appreciate the level to which the approval of the French state and what ASO does has this massive downstream effect on all of pro cycling. Right, we're not going to spend too much time, I think, in this particular show talking about all these the precursors to one cycling, which happened over the course of starting in sort of the early 2000s with Lance Armstrong. That's fun, but all that stuff, the reason why that stuff keeps getting batted back, the reason why nobody has been able to come in and really make any massive shifts, stretches all the way back to this origin story and the French state's fingers in this race and ownership of this race that they then essentially passed off to a family, and the French state really picking winners and losers in that post-World War II period, and the Amaury family absolutely being one of the chosen winners.
Well, the other interesting thing of the reason, one of the reasons the French government really started getting the race going again and supporting it financially after the war was because you had the Communist Party's mock version, as well as other competitors, of the Tour de France. Theirs was called La Ronde de France, which was like a 5-day rip-off of it, basically. And so it's funny how there was this race to then be like, well, which one is the real Tour de France now after this hugely tumultuous period where maybe things felt like a reset and you could be like, well, actually, this is the Tour de France now. And so the French state almost raced to, pick its side and the one that it could control. And because, as we will see, how conservative the approach to the running of the race is, it all stems back from this control at the start of this period, which has never really changed, despite the whole world changing. And then, when TV comes into it, which we'll get onto, where that's the first time after live television pictures start, that's when the race starts making, proper money. But then that becomes even more important for the French state, because we understand the Tour de France in the modern era now as a huge advertisement for France and tourism and showing off the country. So it's gone beyond just being this French patriotic thing for the French to be proud of and this binding unity. It's now like, look how great France is.
Right. I've just figured out, I think, how to pull people in to talk to us. So here's I don't want to just pull people at random, right? Because people are dropping. I just yank you into the show. So here's the deal. If you put in comments over on the right here, which are also showing up for anybody watching on YouTube or anything, you can see the comments on the bottom right. If you put let's pick an emoji. So if you hover over your comment, you can put an emoji on it. Put the what do you think? Little party emoji.
Sure.
If you stick one of those on your comment, I will know that you want to chat, and I can pull you in, and I can pull you into the studio for a bit. Let's see, because there's lots of stuff over here that we're trying to keep an eye on. This one from Ronnie. Do you think, Jonny? I pull that one up.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up with the technology. Mirroring the Tour de France through
we
the
will,
ages.
For the actual podcast,
Yeah,
this will
it'll
be edited down slightly.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure this out. All right, Ronnie asks, I'm interested in Jonny and Caley's perspective on sports media throughout this time and how newspapers in the publishing world evolved during the early time period of the book. Feels like many of the themes from the book continue today. First of all, jealousy is primarily...
I know, I've got that in my notes.
It's primarily my thoughts on media at that time. It was a time of... It was a time of late lunches and long lunches, and I think that a pretty good time to be in media. I mean, one of the fascinating things to me, and again, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but as this transition from the Tour de France being intended to sell newspapers to then the Tour de France actually being the point, like from a revenue perspective. Like it became the sole focus and it was truly commercialized over the course of sort of 20, 30 years there. And that shift, it reflects a lot of what happens in media more generally, which is that particularly these days, a lot of the ways that a media entity keeps itself alive is it's actually just sort of a front for a much more profitable business or a business with much higher margins, right? Because we all know media is a really difficult business these days. The cost of content is really high, and the ability to monetize things is hard. So yeah, lots of media companies do other stuff in the background. They either run events or they sell something else or whatever. And this is essentially just another version of that. It's proof that it's a tale as old as time. Jeff has put a party in his.
I was just gonna just off the back of that point, like the line from, I believe it's Godet when he's handing over or I can't remember who it was, but maybe around the 60s was, the race has to break even because the whole point of it is that we're going to sell all these extra copies of the supplementary tour coverage,
right?
Which is an insanely different business model. But then also the way that people consume the race, where everyone's rushing to buy the paper to find out what happened, is just so much more communal. Like we kind of have that now with this live podcast or Discord and all those things. But the physical, in-person nature of everyone rushing to go and read it does give that sort of wistful, like, oh, maybe like there are things that we've lost that people used to have, which makes you feel a bit sad. And I think that obviously just comes from the point that our lives would be so much cooler if we were journalists at the Tour in 1960s. I don't know.
Yeah. Mike Marino. I just Jeff, I just invited you. If it's not working, let me know. I invited you to the studio, which I think then sticks you down at the bottom here, and then I can add you to the screen once you're in there. Again, if it's not working, just drop a comment and we'll figure it out. But Mike Marino just said here, I'm going to pull this one up. However, when Godet was running the tour and the key newspapers were licensed to print money, and that's what I mean by the jealousy, the jealousy thing.
Oh yeah, the
right?
ads.
Because
the only way to advertise, anything. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a monopoly. Right? It was a monopoly on distribution. Is the way that media used to work. Jeff has entered the studio. Let me just finish this thought, Jeff, and then we'll pull over to you. Yeah, it was a monopoly. It was a distribution monopoly, and so therefore you had to own a printing press to be able to do media, and so it required a certain amount of capital. And so like the difference between today, right? Anyone can make media, right? We're sitting here. I've got I don't know, $200 worth of podcast gear, and you can get a subscription to StreamYard for like $9 a month, and you could make a podcast, right? That's all it takes.
Yeah.
Back then, totally different, and because of that, essentially, monopoly is not really the right word, but a stranglehold on the distribution. It meant that the only place anyone could advertise was with these papers, and it was literally printing money at that point.
And the publishers would launch titles just to compete against other publishers, regardless of whether it was going to be a profitable magazine. It was more the strategic element of. Whereas nowadays, when was the last time anything was launched like that?
Let's pull Jeff in. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
There we go. We can hear you and everything. Did you have a question or a comment? What were your thoughts?
I guess the question is, it felt like the French government's power wasn't really explored. And because we don't get much insight into the way the Amory family thinks, it was hard to know how much they're led around by the French government or vice versa.
What do you think, Johnny?
I think that's the theme throughout the book, is that Alex Duff struggles to get any inroads into the Amory family, and you see that even through talking to the team managers, where they're like, "Yeah, we try and talk to them all the time, and you just get shut down by Madame Amory." And it's, I guess there's some businesses you see like, there are business owners who exist outside of the public realm, which nowadays, when you have all these business owners as celebrities, feels quite weird and antiquated. But it also seems like the smart way of doing business, right? If no one can pick over dozens of interviews of how you think, it then gives you the upper hand. I think it'd be interesting to that is the main unexplored point of the book, right, as you say. But if I had to guess, I would say you get the sense that the Amory family kind of lives in fear of the French state taking the race from them, and they can't, bag their tens of millions of euros of dividends a year. So you get the sense through, after the initial, the descendants of the family really lock on to this idea of don't upset the apple cart, be a stable partner, and everything will be okay, and we will have this successful business that we've not lucked into, but have found ourselves on the receiving end of, more rich than you could think. So definitely but it works both ways, because you also don't want them trying to sell off the race to someone. I don't know.
Have you guys seen the Netflix show The Crown?
Yes.
It's British royal family, and mostly follows the Queen over the course of her life. Things kept reminding me of that show in terms of like the royals in Johnny, you would know more about this than I would, obviously, but the royals in England were sort of tasked with this duty to kind of stand quietly and not really make a big fuss and just kind of smooth things over, often between sort of the state and the people. And I kept getting this similar vibe out of the Amory family, and I feel like the political element of it was the French state had given this stamp of approval to go do this thing, but it was maybe a tacit agreement that the Amorys had to therefore like not cause any fuss and not really change too much and
Yeah.
keep it pretty conservative. And that was sort of the underlying agreement between the two parties was like, if you're going to show France to the world, that's great, that's fine, and we will allow you to continue to do that, so long as you do the Queen Elizabeth like walking around shaking hands quietly and sort of not really getting in the way all that
Yeah,
much.
and then
Yeah.
then like the parallel also is that then behind the scenes when it's the real conversations between the people that matter, because the team owners matter, but not at the stakes we're talking about, right? So then I imagine there is a lot more, politicking going on between the family and the government, especially when you have, Macron has been criticized recently for really trying to use the race to prop up his image and stuff like that.
We keep showing up.
We keep
Which
showing
they
up.
always do.
They always do, but like making a big song and dance of it. And my favorite ever GIF is the one of Alaphilippe like doing his eyebrows when Macron. I think it's Macron's just in the background. But yeah, it's a useful relationship, I think, to not ruin it. I think that's part of the success is that you've had these two sides trying to not piss each other off.
Good thought from Claire here. Also, was there a fear from politicians of negative coverage in their papers, which would have given them somewhat more leverage? So yeah, I think that's a really good point, Claire, which is that this is not an entirely one-sided thing, right? Like both entities have a fair amount of power, and I think particularly the further you get away from that immediate sort of post-World War II era, where the Emery family was handed this thing, the further you get from that, and the more solidified they were in their control over the not only the tour, but all these papers and things that they owned, right? That empire was very large at one point. The politicians probably had some level of fear of the family just as much as any other direction. Jeff, any other thoughts on that?
I guess a question: am I correct that the revenue that the Emery family gets per year was on the order of tens of millions, but not hundreds of millions? I mean, it seemed smaller than I was expecting going in.
The profits were.
Profits.
Yeah. So total revenue of ASO is somewhere in. We don't have great numbers on this because it's privately held, but I believe, was it like 400 million? I think, Jonny.
Yeah, maybe.
But that includes obviously Tour de France and the Dakar Rally and the Paris Marathon and L'Equipe, and they sold off Le Parisien, as was in the book, like 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the actual sort of the profits off the back of that is only in the low tens of millions, and that's why, again, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but maybe it's just inevitable. Maybe we should just embrace the tangents on this particular
Yeah, let's do it.
chat. It's why things like profit sharing, revenue sharing with teams just doesn't make any sense at all. And we've talked about this in the pod over the years, right? But the push for that under the current system doesn't make a single ounce of sense, because you'd be like, okay, every team gets $1.5 million euros. You could buy one more Rigoberto Urán. Congratulations! Like you're not that's not going to do anything for you, really. And there's just no, there's no real trickle down. I think that what sits underneath that, though, is if you had an entity with this much power and this much control over the sport that was willing to sort of think about the whole pie, that's essentially the argument that's been made over the years by One Cycling, by Lance and Co., by 4 or 5 different groups, again, since like late 90s, early 2000s, that if you consider growth of the whole thing, that those tens of millions could turn into hundreds of millions in theory, as we've seen in things like tennis, etc.
Anyway, this was great. I'm going to hop out of the studio now, but thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Continuing that thought of the friction between growing the sport and like basically the teams and other parties trying to get the Emery family to think bigger as opposed to them not, is do you have the underlying conditions to ensure that whatever you create can grow organically in the current economic climate over years into something that people feel as passionate about as the tour, which I think is incredibly hard to do. And if I had to, when we talk about when in the book, when they explore the various ideas of different parties trying to change the Emery family, and funnily enough, they all get sort of, dragged off to the corner to take their ideas with them, even if the ideas end up working and becoming apparent, is that there's a reason why it's persisted. And I think the book definitely lands on the side of being an argument for the conservatism. And I think, I agree with that.
So question for the audience out there too. Are you team Jacques Godet or team Félix Levitan? Because they were they're partners and they were rivals and one took over from the other, right? But there were different perspectives on the race, and I think that Levitan's perspective, well, it won out in the end, right? He was the one that truly commercialized the Tour de France, and he was. Yes, we're talking about the Tour being quite conservative and the Amory family being quite conservative, but he was one of the few over the course of that 70 years that really did sort of do a leap forward in the way that the Tour operated. So yeah, what team are you on, Johnny? Are you Jacques Godet, sort of like very careful conservatism, or are you Félix Levitan, expense scandal? What team are you on?
The expense scandal feels very picking and choosing, because when they describe like their offices and the lunches they go to, I'm sure that you could have drummed up expense, charges on anyone. If I had to pick one side, definitely Godet, but there's a usefulness to the Levitans of the world, which I think the traditionalists then use to their advantage, where they get these not outsiders necessarily, because Levitan obviously works their way up through, but these experimentalists to do these uncomfortable things, take the easier parts of it, and then run with that without, they never want one of these revolutionists to be in charge of the whole thing, because that's too scary in the minds of the people who run the show.
Well, and Matt down here points out that Levitan was the one who pushed for the sort of sponsored team structure, which is one of the really fundamental structural changes that happened.
Oh yeah,
and we've joked on the pod before about wanting to go back to national teams. So, but at the same time, I fundamentally I don't think that would actually work. Mike Marino writes down there, I'm on Team Levitan because he was a man of vision. Mike, can you expand upon that either in the comments here or we'll pull you in? What did you like about his vision? Like what about it was?
It sounds like Levitan from Beyond the Grave.
Anyone seen Mike and Levitan?
Levitan syndrome?
Room? Don't think so.
Maybe we wait for Mike to get back. But the topic I'd like to get onto next is the preserving of French culture, which is we've kind of touched on already, but the way that the race really leaned into. No, the government lent into using the race as part of their, striving against globalization. Or the globalization of France, where, we kind of joke about this in French, how there are French ways of doing things. And even now in 2025, you can't persuade them otherwise. Like when the baker sells out of bread in the morning of the same amount of bread that he's bought every day of his life, even though the Tour de France is in town, that's it. And that's just how things work. And you get frustrated by that. I get a little bit frustrated by that. But then I have a deep respect for not bending to, your lived environment around you, and that there's a way things are done.
10,000 people on this mountain. If you just made sandwiches for us all, you'd
exactly.
cover your year.
And I guess I didn't know that it went that deep in terms of that it really fed into geopolitics in that way. Going on from the French government intervening and Coca-Cola trying to take over Orangina, which then, if you do think about it, I'm kind of glad that doesn't exist. Maybe that's just like the way I am politically, but I enjoyed that. And then I enjoyed Marc Madiot as well, and his him jumping on the back of the farmer protest because of the region of France he's from, being like, I cannot wear the EU badge on my jersey. I mean,
we were already big Madiot fans, and I think
it's great getting more of his origin story of just how he's always just been doing things his own way. And you can kind of see why he's reticent to change now after all these years, right? He's, an older man who has been very successful, and why
Yeah.
should he suddenly change the way he's done things forever? I kind of like the
100%.
railing against, the newfangled way of doing things.
Yeah. I'm actually really briefly. I'm going to put Claire back up here, and then we'll come back. Further to that, Johnny, the fact that 2/3 of the French listed companies remain privately owned
Wow.
keeps that nationalistic mentality.
And like, I don't hate that. I think
Yeah.
it's hard to separate your own personal beliefs from your interpretations of the book, but there at least I think a lot of the time in the modern world people struggle for meaning in a lot of things, and especially when you see, like, we even see it in the way that cycling's televised in this day and age, and things are constantly bought and sold and chopped and changed without much care for the consumer, and a bit
care.
more of a French mentality of just families paying high taxes from their dividends,
Right.
and making sure things remain, there's like some level of continuity, and there's not this big like fraction is
Can
good.
you imagine France TV giving up the rights to broadcast the Tour de France and going to some paid service? Like,
It'd be
it's not
insane.
even. You can't imagine it. You literally can't. We have a comment from Moritz here. So, reading the book, I was going back and forth, siding with and against the Amory's power hold on the Tour. For one, I want the teams to get more money out of it. On the other hand, there's always the lingering fear of a sellout destroying the race. This comment gets to the fundamental. I did the same thing. I went back and forth a dozen different times reading this book, being like, God, this is so frustrating. Because I think in general, and maybe this is just American mindset, in general, I'm in favor of whoever the modern day Leviathan would be, right? Like, who's going to push the sport, who's going to push it forward and sort of rethink things. And the status quo is not really working for a lot of stakeholders in cycling. What do we do to fix that? And generally, I'm in favor of not necessarily like one cycling, but things in that vein. And I'm certainly in favor of exploring them. But then you read the book, and it really it at times makes an excellent case for the conservatism of the family. Right. It makes an excellent case for slow down, and we don't need to, growth doesn't have to be the end goal in and of itself. Right. Which is a very, it's just a mindset that, I don't know. I found myself personally struggling back and forth with what we,
I just popped up Greg's comment here because it leads on, where Greg says no other sport that he follows has the same vibe of pro cycling, and I think ASO refusing to let go plays a large part in that. And I completely agree. Like, the thing I was going back and forth on was, I enjoy the Tour de France more than any other race. Is this still on? Have I crashed?
Yeah.
I crashed for a second. Sorry, no, the screen went weird. I enjoy the Tour more than any other race, and theoretically I would love many more Tours de France, like a Tour of America, or other races to be more Tour de France-y. But can you have that without sacrificing what it is in the pursuit of growing it? Can you grow it in a way where you don't lose the soul and you follow it becomes very samey as everything else?
Yeah. The Rockets need a Krokmaster truck at the Tour next year.
I mean, they're a good example of people coming out and doing something different, and also not waiting for permission and just doing it.
I like this one. Oh. The realization as a cycling fan that pro cycling will always be an odd backwater is oddly annoying and comforting at the same time. Yes, exactly. I swung the full pendulum back and forth, being like, yes, I love the fact that this family has protected this thing for 70 years and not really let the modern sports industrial complex take it, right? Because you look at stuff like, Johnny, you and I are both English football fans, and there's the constant hemming and hawing about all of the things that are done in that sport that are not really for the fans in any way. Or the World Cup in the States next year is a great example where, like, you can get a ticket to a World Cup match for less than like $1,000 right now, which is insane. That's the sort of, if you follow that path incessantly, that's where you end up. That's the logical conclusion. And the Amory family has really sort of helped prevent that and pull that back.
Do you think it's just a coincidence that somehow there's an overlap between what fans clearly enjoy and want and what pleases the French government? Because I don't think the French government are necessarily that, as long as it shows France off and it's kind of loved by everyone. But there's leeway there, right? But it seems like actually weirdly, a lot of interested parties, as in ASO, fans, and the French state are kind of all pulling in the same direction, which is then weird to put the teams and riders on the other side of that, which doesn't. That seems dissonant to me. I don't know.
I just pulled up Mike's comment here. What would a 21st century Levitan do, or be able to do, to change the tour for the better? I have a couple things, Jonny, maybe you do as well, but everyone else in the comments, if you have thoughts on that, more the merrier here, because I think that it's a kind of a fundamental question. I think the closest we've probably seen is Flanders Classics in the last 5 years, right? It's a lot of small things, and maybe the reason why it's small things with them is because they are not the Tour de France and they can't make like massive structural change in the way that swapping from national teams to commercial sort of sponsored teams was a huge structural change. Like the Flanders Classics doesn't have the power to do that, but they've just sort of picked away at the edges and made it a more coherent product, and added things like the VIP tents and things like that, which, and I know we scoff at these things, but that as a group, that they're now much more profitable. In fact, I don't think they were profitable 10 years ago. The sustainability it should be a goal here, and they're among the only races that are being produced that are being produced profitably without being the Tour de France, right? And there's something to be said for that in sort of the long-term continuation of the sport. You need race organizers to be able to actually be profitable and be sustainable businesses. So I think that's probably the closest sort of analog we have, and even that is just picking away at the edges. It's not anything massive.
Do you think Levitan would be pursuing creating a Formula One type broadcasting model where you can bring a lot of it in house and charge fans directly? Especially, sports rights have gone up because of the way that all these broadcasting deals are shaken out, and it's one of the few things you can monetize and hedge against streaming platforms, even though they're getting involved. Do you think that's a direction that he would race towards with more abandon than they currently are, where they're just happy to take the money off Discovery and whoever?
It feels like that's the actual. When I mentioned before that Flanders Classics was not really doing structural change, they're kind of working at the edges. The structural change at this point would be changing the relationship between fans and broadcast and the race, fundamentally. Like that would be the structural change that would happen, because we're not going to go through another thing like go back to national teams, or you can do all this sort of playing around with, we're going to have 7 riders on the tour, or 9 riders, like whatever. That stuff's all kind of irrelevant. What would really fundamentally change it is bringing the broadcast of the race and the way that is monetized into not even just the 21st century, but really into like the 2020s, because there's been massive upheaval in the way that all works in the last 4 or 5 years. And I don't even know what that would look like. Yeah. I'm not deep enough inside broadcast media, to be honest, to really know what that would look like. And yeah, I think that anything below that, like that, there's some chat over here about like Brad here puts in road cycling is unique in being a public event. Going to a cycle race is not like going to a football match, for better and worse. Like that's absolutely true. And even if you ticketed Alpe d'Huez, I don't think that would have the sort of structural impact on the sport as a change in the way that broadcasting works. Because that's the relationship between the race and its audience at this point, is that the broadcasters and how exactly that functions and the structures underneath that. But again, I don't know what that looks like. I genuinely, you'd need someone much smarter than me who works in TV to have those answers.
The Marty Robertson asks, for Tour of America, or any other nation, but I guess America makes sense, who would be the Elmeri equivalent to pull these events off? The Walmart? Who are the Walmarts?
Like the family behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, they built all the Bentonville mountain bike stuff. Yeah. That's probably it. And they already fund vast swaths of American cycling. That's probably the closest thing. But also, I don't think you're going to have anywhere near the level of conservatism from the Walmart family.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, I think that would be a very different end result.
I think the thing is as well is that obviously the geography of France just lends itself, both in terms of different topography and the size. That means you can get around the whole country in 3 weeks and go to a bunch of different places. Whereas I think that's probably the thing that would always hold a Tour of America back, is you struggle to get a cohesive
Yeah, it's too big.
route. It's way too big.
To what we were discussing in Spin Cycle an hour ago, which
Yes, the constant big small country debate. But yeah, what did you think? I'm just going to jump ahead with my own question. What do you think of all the discussion of the worries about doping and that impacting the image of the race? Because I found that quite insightful and lends itself to certain murmurings that I've heard over the past few years of how ASO have viewed certain things.
Well, I mean, one of the funniest things to me was the prize money not keeping pace with other sports, and the Amaury family basically saying, "Well, why should we give you prize money when you're all cheating?" Right? Which I think is a very it's kind of astute.
It's very Amaury family.
Yeah, very Amaury. But it's also kind of an excuse to just be like, no, if we double the because again, to our point earlier, there's not that much profit here to be split. So if the Amaury family does want to take their 10, 20 million euro dividends, there's not actually that much room to give more to the winners of the bike race. Yeah,
but at the same time, what was I going to say? I've forgotten this live podcast.
I was reading comments from Ryan over here. Tour of California may have been a closer analog. And I think that if you're talking about the Tour of America thing, you're right. Like California or Colorado or whatever, you'd have to shrink it down somewhat. But yeah, the Walton family would only do it if it was in Arkansas, which would not be I mean, Arkansas is a beautiful place, but there's no big mountains. It would be a pretty weird 3-week Grand Tour if it was all in Arkansas, I think.
Oh, sorry. I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Slightly related to the doping thing, but how every time that they've come up against the team owners and riders all trying to band together and force their hand, and ASO just turns around and is like, we'll just get other riders and other teams. And
yeah,
I found it very hard to argue against that, because if you ran a Tour de France without the World Tour, because they were all banding together and it was just French teams, mostly French continental teams, I would watch that. It would almost be, and especially if it was a one-off while they figure stuff out.
Yeah.
You'd always then look back and be like, do you remember the 2026 Tour de France where it was like that amateur guy who has a regular job won the Tour de France?
Yeah.
It'd actually be better for the race long term, I think, if you had one holdout year that then they replaced the field with amateurs. That'd be great.
Yeah, there's a reason why that sort of collective action has never really worked. One, because the teams they don't agree with themselves, and so it would never really function. They all view it quite differently. And there's always enough French teams that would be like, nah, we'll go to the race. we're gonna cross that picket line. Yeah, it would never really work. Raphael in the comments just pointed out that the Tour's broadcast on free to watch TV is guaranteed by law.
We have that in the UK for certain things as well.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
Although it gets challenged a lot. But yeah, things I learned not related to cycling from the book. Godet invented the Champions League. in football.
Yeah.
That was just dropped in there as if it was like describing what he had for lunch, like on a certain day
Right.
in the 1960s.
I did appreciate the line in there shortly after that was like, and if he'd held on to any portion of it, his family would be billionaires.
I know. So tough. But like, it's crazy to think. I guess it's just not having lived then, but the idea that these things didn't always just exist.
Yeah.
And it took someone to just be like, you know what? Different clubs from different countries in Europe playing each other for a big trophy.
Would be fun.
That's probably a good idea. And everyone was like, yeah, you know what? That is a good idea. But no one had thought of it, despite football being around for decades. It's actually a very cycling way of approaching football, which is fun.
I just realized I missed
Oh.
Mike asking to be brought on the stage. Mike, do you still want to be brought on the stage? You drop into the comments and tell us if you still want to be brought on the stage. And if anybody else has questions, thoughts, like it's a lot of Jonny and I sort of providing our perspective here, but I'm everybody read the book, right? Y'all did your homework, right? Everyone did their homework.
Yeah, this is it is fun doing this as a regular podcast, but I do feel the pressure's been amped up a bit that I am having to do like an oral sort of exam on the book, having to use in big words.
It took me about a month to read it because of my small children that stopped me from doing things. And so I feel like I read the first section of it ages ago. I had to go read it again last night to remind myself. Mike, I just invited you, so if you should be able to pop in here. This is a fun one. In the non-serious column, there's a drinking game to be played with the book at each use of the adjective money spinning.
Oh god, that's what an editor's supposed to do is take that stuff away.
I will say so. I mean, huge kudos to Alex for putting this book together. There were a couple editing errors in at least the copy that I
my heart dropped when there was like an errant like letter just on its own or something like that.
Yeah, there was a few things like that, and there's a couple bits that I was surprised made it through a legal edit, to be honest, but because we do that, like the Emerys are they're not shy about that sort of thing. All right, let's pull Mike in here. How are you, Mike?
Hello, guys. Very well, thank you.
Welcome to the show. What are your thoughts? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I just posted about what I thought was interesting about the Americanization of it, and how there were. Well, I shouldn't say the Americanization because you also get into the Sky Air and there's the Englishization of it. But it went from being the race itself went from being a parochial race to a worldwide race. The book also talked about Levitan, how he embraced Latin America, which we couldn't imagine the race or cycling without Latin America now. Those are just a couple things that struck me. That and the idea of who would be the new Levitan. Because I mean, where do you go? It's all around the world. Now, how do you? Other than what I mentioned in the feed, the streaming interactive, like you mentioned, Caley, the F1 type production. What else can they really do?
Or do they want to? Do they want to do anything else? Yeah,
that's true.
It does feel like when they talk about how they started changing the post-race interviews to being in English and stuff like that, kind of for the TV audience, right, was a halfway house of being like, okay, well, we'll go this far in sort of looking outward, but then there are the hard stops of the things they wouldn't do, as much to Mark Madio's displeasure. But it feels like if you with the technology now, you could then have the broadcasts in Asia and do a much better job of that. But then the problem is as well, trying to internationalize it, the race is still going to be on when like half the world is sleeping. So there's only so far you can go, and to convince millions or billions of people to wake up for a sporting event, if it's a 200-kilometer flat stage to Carcassonne or something like that, if you sit through one of them, you're probably not going to then wake up for Alpe. So there's definitely limits to it, and maybe they have reached the limit of how far it can go. But it's always hard to trust the numbers, I find, of when the tour says we've reached this many, millions, billions of people have watched the tour this summer. I'm like, not that I want to see the workings out because I wouldn't be able to pick through the numbers, but it's kind of like, well, how international is it? Just because it's broadcast in all these countries, how many people are they just expats who are watching from, you know, the Gambia or something?
Well, they claimed recently that it was like a third of humanity had seen the Tour de France.
Yeah, like,
which I don't think is true. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but like, yeah, seems extremely unlikely. Ryan down at the bottom here just said there's the Velon data play. That is one of the few things. I would classify that in the same space as Flanders Classics, and sort of working away at the edges and trying to find a couple nickels and dimes here and there, when fundamentally without a pretty structural change in the way that the race is broadcast and how that's monetized, you're not going to see much change. But Velon is an interesting case, and there was more about the creation of Velon in the book than I thought there would be. This is right around when I was starting my career in cycling journalism. So actually, there's a bunch of stories I wrote referenced in the book, which I thought was fun. And I remember chatting. I remember talking with all these people in like sort of 2011, 2012, 2013 about all this stuff showing up for the first time and what their plans were. And they had a big vision for Velon back then, 10 plus years ago. These days, they've realigned with reality a little bit in the way that they think about monetizing these assets that the teams have, the data assets that the teams have. But yeah, I mean, they were talking about, because initially, and this is in the book, like it was almost a spin-off of like a team union of some sort, right? And a potential leverage point on ASO to start sharing revenue or something like that. And so to watch that sort of slim down over the last decade, I think has been interesting. Mike, I'm gonna pop you off of here. That's right.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in.
The Velon thing, because I was reading the book on the way back from flying out of China, and the Velon guy mentioned in the book was on the race with a couple of his employees, because obviously the World Tour events have got to cover it. So I'd literally said goodbye to him at the airport and then got on the plane and then turned the page over and it's suddenly talking about the guy. I was like, what is going on here? So it would have been useful. Yeah. So it would have been useful if I'd read it a bit quicker, and then I could have probably asked him about some
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've chatted with him a bunch of times over the years. Super smart guy. I didn't realize that he had come from English football, from Liverpool. Was that right?
I think so.
I think Liverpool commercial guy, right? Yeah, I didn't realize that's where he had come from. We're running up against time here.
Yeah,
I think we were going to try to cut it off at 10:30, so we have 2 minutes or so.
Shall I bring up one? I found one more.
Let's bring up one more thing and see where we.
This is just more on the broadcast from Han Kim. In poker, the big innovation was putting cameras in the table so viewers knew more than the players. It's the cycling equivalent to this, granting access to race radio. I think we've spoken before about how innovations like that would definitely aid. I don't know, the sport, how everyone tells the stories and how close you can get to the action. Because if you imagine watching poker without any of that, it'd be insane. It'd be an insane thing to watch. It's probably how some people think, oh, so you watch someone ride a bike for 200 kilometers. But yeah, I mean, but the problem is, right, is that you still have this thing in cycling as opposed to football, where you kind of can see most things play out on the pitch, is that there's still so much to be gained from, secrecy to a certain extent. And
there's no entity at the moment that is forcing something like that through, right? So this is where we come back to ASO being very conservative. They could,
they should.
They kind of have in bits and pieces. They could go to all these teams and say, we're going to put this thing on your bike, and it's going to give us, to Ryan's point on here, live power and live heart rate. And you also have to give us testing numbers for all these riders. So we actually have a little dial gauge at the bottom that shows you whether they're in the red or not. And so you actually know more than the riders do at that point about their competitors. To bring it back to the poker thing, we're also gonna, there's gonna be live location, and there's gonna be live race radio, and all these other things. And at the same time, one of the things that teams have always said is they don't want that information to go to competitors, and they're all watching the TVs in their cars, right? Take the TVs out of the cars. That would help.
Well, and F1, they've developed their own way of. Sometimes they'll throw a dummy call in, and like it's developed this whole other level of tactics. Which, to be honest, I think cycling as an endurance sport could, benefit from. Is another tactical element to it.
I think the point that the audience needs to have more information than the athletes is actually a really good one. But the problem is, at the moment, they're like, you can't even get the teams to say okay to race radio stuff, right? And granted, part of that is because they're saying we'll pay you $50,000 for it, and Visma's like, we don't.
They should
care.
just tell them.
Yeah, that's
rather than,
that's the thing is, if I think the second you even put we're going to pay you for it on the table, it won't be enough money. Whereas ASO just said, well, then you can't do the bicycle race. you're not invited anymore. Then they'd be like, okay, yeah, we will do that. We'll put whatever you want on the bikes. And so that was one of these over and over and over again. You've got these instances where like the Emery family and the tour in general is happy to put their foot down on very specific things and to direct the future of the sport on very specific things, but then refuse to do so in some of these other areas that may, again, I'm not saying that doing that would change the sport overnight, but would certainly improve the product. And at the end of the day, an improved product would mean, in theory, grow in the pie, additional money for everybody. All right.
Yeah. Final
We've got
thoughts.
an hour of book club.
A final thought, Caley?
Final thought. Well, we scooted way out. We intended to focus today on like the first third of this book, and then we basically scooted straight past it and started talking about the implications to today. But that's fine. That's what book club is. We're guided by what we want to talk about and what you all want to talk about. So final thought is, I think we should we do one more of these? There's more to talk about. We'll see.
Yeah, if we can find enough.
Yeah.
Definitely. We should try and get Alex on. Is what we should really try
so
and do.
maybe that's what we'll do next time is we'll pull in the author. Again, I've already been in touch with him. And pull him in, and we can do a little like sort of ask Alex anything kind of thing. Until then, so those of you who joined us today, thank you. Huge thank you. Again, I was expecting like 3 people, and we've got many times that.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your thoughts and jumping in. This won't go out over the sort of public airwaves until is it next week? 2 weeks?
2
weeks
weeks
from now.
Yeah.
We're gonna stick it out over Thanksgiving when we're not working. So those of you who are in here, you got a special early view of it, and then maybe shortly after Thanksgiving we'll pull Alex in and do like another round, give some other folks a chance to pick up the book and read it. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's wrap this one up. I'm gonna hit end. See you all next time. Sometimes you hit end, it doesn't actually end, so we're about to find out.
No, it might end the record now.
Let's see. End stream.
Hit it.
2, 1.